something I'd beat New Zealand up for. It's we're a small market. We tend to do a lot of bespoke things, so we don't think about scalability as well as, say, businesses in Europe or businesses in the United States would. It's probably a manifestation of the number 8 fencing wire that's on the bad side.
All right, Scotty.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Welcome back.
Thank you very much.
So we've had a bit of attention since last time we did this. There'll be a few followers, a few people watching.
Yes.
But we'd love to give them a bit of an introduction to who you are and what you do.
Yeah, cool. Scott Bain, CEO of SaferCities, the guy with the loud shirts. Seems to become my signature at the moment.
Yep.
Enabling safety by connecting the world. That's pretty much what SaferCities does and what we love doing.
Awesome, love it. So thank you. Let's kick straight into this. Today we want to chat about startups here in Aotearoa.
Yeah.
Could you give some of our international views some context on the New Zealand startup space?
Yeah, so I remember when I came back from California, Silicon Valley, which is 2008, and Pioneer Capital, where a friend of mine worked, I was asking him the same question, are there any startups in New Zealand? And there was about 15 to 1800 on their books back then, right? So the big surprising thing for me, to contrast New Zealand with, say, Silicon Valley or elsewhere in Europe, is that they were all hidden. They were sort of there, but under the surface, which seems to be more of a New Zealand way of doing it, whereas in Silicon Valley, they're everywhere and you see them and you hear about them. In terms of the contrast, I noticed New Zealand's a lot quieter about its startup culture, but it is there.
Yeah, and in terms of like finding funding and VCs to help that, like how was it for New Zealand companies trying to find that sort of support and help at that time?
I've heard it's harder. We've self-funded SaferCities, always have, and that's the plan. But yeah, I've heard it's a lot more difficult here. There's probably less money flying around, or there was back then. I think that's getting easier to come out of Australia too. It is harder because we're a smaller market, but it's still possible. What
do you think are some things to help that could have helped make that easier for New Zealand companies?
I think what NZTE and Callaghan are doing is making it easier. Okay. I think both those organisations are awesome, and we're associated with both. So I don't know, I probably haven't looked in this space, Stanley, for 10, 12 years, so I'm probably a little bit out of date with it, but I think it's getting better, it's getting easier, but it's still not Silicon Valley where there's just VCs everywhere and money flying around everywhere. So and that's just a reality of New Zealand and where we are.
Where we are, yeah. Which leads in quite nicely to the next space, because I mean, as you said, SaferCities is self-funded.
Yes.
So when you started off in this, you were a startup.
Yes.
What is that process of creating a startup here, especially as a self-funded startup, because it's a lot different to a normal funded VC route?
Yeah, so I think I saw opportunities and problems and things that were not going so well in the market and things that we could help with. Probably we were lucky because we were able to consult and bring money into the business that way by adding value in that way, and use that to fund what we wanted to build from a software perspective. So kind of the hard way to go about it. It's taken a lot longer, but at least we can control our own destiny a lot more. We don't have to, be answerable to the funders, and so that was something that appealed to me. There was you may have heard me mention him in the first podcast, but always remember Dave Rothwell saying, I'd rather we build a business and we fail because it's a mistake that we made, than have to be on the phone every Friday afternoon to tell shareholders or funders what we've done, that week. So it was a mentality that we had to be more in control of our own destiny, even if it was harder to get there.
Yeah, I love that. So, would you have changed anything?
No. No, and we have thought many times, should we go and get funding, and we still are happy that we don't have to, and we're liking the growth of the company, we're liking the customers essentially fund us from doing the right things and making the right software.
Cool. And are there, as you're going through this journey, were there other New Zealand companies that you looked at thinking, wow, they're doing really cool stuff over there in the startup world?
Yeah, there were. There's lots, right? Of course, Xero is an easy one, and I like the early days of Tate. I was thinking about this question before. There's lots that PushPay. There's lots of New Zealand companies do well, and then they tend to head overseas, right? So we forget about them. But
yeah, a few different ones that have done some cool stuff, eh?
Absolutely.
And about those companies, that have done some cool things, like the Xeros and that in the world. What was it that made them unique in that startup world as they went worldwide?
I think the New Zealand number 8 fencing wire mentality. I think I've got a fundamental belief that New Zealanders are a bit more insecure than the rest of the world because of where we are. So we try a bit harder. We think the rest of the world's better, smarter, faster, and it's not. But it makes us try harder. So I think that's what makes us unique a little bit.
Yeah.
So by the time we get to the rest of the world, we're expecting it to be harder than what it might appear to be, and so we work harder.
Yeah, I've been hearing that a lot lately myself, that as we look to expand into the US, I keep saying, oh, it's a bigger prize, it's a bigger thing. And a lot of people say, you're not going to feel that once you're actually there. You're actually going to. And is that kind of the way you see the world too?
People are people, markets are markets. I think what I enjoy about United States and Europe is the markets are so much bigger. So if you get something right, the multipliers are bigger. They're also more complicated. I think we underestimated how complicated United States was. 50 different states, it's really 50 different countries. And in what we do, every state's different. So probably would do that a little bit differently if we did it again.
And speaking of the US, you spent a bit of time in Silicon Valley.
We did,
and which is, I guess, the capital of startup space in that world and high growth tech companies. Can we dig into a little bit of that? Like, what did you do there? What was your time like while you were there?
Yeah, so my first time there was with Cisco, and I loved it. And it was good to feel what Silicon Valley was like, to feel the energy. There's a lot of type A mentalities there, very, very hard working ethic. And I sort of fundamentally worked out, or I thought there were two different types of people there. There was either the people who would do a startup, build that up in the hope that a corporate would buy them out, or there were people in the corporate that wanted to climb the corporate chain, right? I was probably more the mentality of the first, even though I was in a corporate. So it was a fascinating place. I loved it. I often talk about it, rightly or wrongly, as almost being like a Mount Wellington, Auckland, with all these industrial buildings everywhere. But the industries are all the ones I admired, as I grew up. So and it's obviously multiple times the size of Mount Wellington. But yeah, really cool place. You'd walk into a Starbucks, you'd bump into CEOs of really amazing companies, and you'd strike up a conversation with them. So just stuff you can't do here. It's very, very concentrated. Beautiful weather. I think it rained for 2 weeks in the whole 2 years that I was fortunate enough to be there, which is a bit different from New Zealand at the moment, as we know. But no, cool place. And I guess I was actually there a few months ago, and we were there when we tried to take SaferCities into California. So it's a cool place, expensive, lots of cool people, but no one any different massively from people here. So I guess I had this illusion when I was young that there were smarter people, brighter people, more successful. That broke down when I was here, right? We're all the same. They just happen to be in a concentrated market with 330 million people on their back doorstep. So when they get it right, things go better. But
I was going to ask about that too, and you said concentration. The concentration of the people is probably the thing, just because there's more of them. They're not any better, there's just more of them. But then you just said something there's 330 million on their back door. How does that ability to, once you get something going, to scale it through America, how does it change the way those businesses operate compared to Kiwis and the way that we think?
I think that they fundamentally know how to scale better than we do. So if it's something I'd beat New Zealand up for, it's we're a small market. We tend to do a lot of bespoke things, so we don't think about scalability as well as, say, businesses in Europe or businesses in United States would. We need to think that we need a special type of car or a special type of network because we're New Zealand and we're special. And so I see those. It's probably a manifestation of the number 8 fencing wire that's on the bad side. But I think United States is interesting because it's got lots of chains throughout it. So if you can get it to work in one state, and there's distribution chains across the country, it's a lot easier to scale that out. And the numbers are huge, and the numbers of people are huge, right? So I think there was a guy I met once when I lived there who made those roof coffins, that you put on the top of your car to put your luggage in, and he was a multi-millionaire, and they were just a fiberglass roof coffin, right? So good for him. But it'd be pretty hard to be that successful with roof coffins, in a country like New Zealand. So
just allows you to think bigger then.
it does, and just the multipliers are bigger.
Talking about that number 8 wire type of attitude, and the real Kiwi mindsets that we have, one of them that's real prominent in today's world is this tall poppy syndrome that we talk about a lot. Did you see things like that in the States, or is that a uniquely New Zealand problem, or how do you see that?
I didn't see it in the States. I also didn't see it in the UK. I think it is a New Zealand and pseudo-Australia thing. I have a theory, potentially a little bit contentious, but that the New Zealand tall poppy syndrome is a manifestation potentially of the British classes system. Whereas in the States it was the opposite. If you did well and you drove around in your Ferrari or whatever like that, people wanted to see whatever you did so they could emulate it. Whereas here they would, tell you off to drive in the Ferrari. So I don't know how well that answers the question.
Do you think it holds us back as Kiwis when we think that way?
I do. I probably see it less these days, or maybe I'm not looking for it. But we were talking about watches before, so I still see I still see it in the mentality that if you do too well, people want to pull you back.
Yeah. And so with that same idea of Kiwis being in New Zealand, being in the US, right now, Kiwi, brand New Zealand has done really well over the last few years. What was it like when you were in Silicon Valley being a Kiwi in the midst of those people?
Same thing, right? I think United States are slightly fascinated by Kiwis, curious. Like with any culture, it's what you bring to the table. But I think a lot of people I met in the United States didn't exactly know where New Zealand was, whether it was attached to Australia, things like that. Which doesn't, I'm not trying to be facetious, but they were curious about the country and what we were like, and and our sense of humour and things like that. So I thought it was more of an asset than anything else to be from New Zealand in the United States.
Yeah. Agreed. Do you've talked about it's been quite hard for you guys to break into the US market, 50 different countries in one thing. Is that normal for most tech companies? Is that a normal thing for New Zealand companies trying to go there? Should they be concerned about anything in particular?
I think so. I was told by some very good mentors that, Scotty, it's going to be harder than you think. And of course, I probably didn't listen as much as I should have back then. This was probably 4 or 5 years ago now when we tried to break into the US. And I don't think we did enough research. We tried really hard. So I think if we were doing it again, we'd do more research. We might pick a particular state that, for what we do, has environmentals that are more in line with the use of the technology. But it is a difficult country. It's a lot more. It's a lot better if you get it right, but it's also a lot more competitive. And that's, I think, what we sometimes underestimate as New Zealanders, right? There are others in the United States with similar ideas, potentially with more money behind them, and so you've got to break past that as well.
Yeah, cool. And in terms of if we go back into the startup sort of ecosystem and world, why are startups essential? Why should people be trying to create startups and get this and take these ideas and build them?
Startups are a really good way to prove the concept or concepts, to do the research and development to see if something's has legs or not. I think New Zealand is a really good place to do startups because the market is small. It's easier to get to certain key individuals at the top of companies or organisations that can be useful in making decisions. So it's faster. It's often faster to develop things here, but then when you get it all working, the market's of a small enough size that it's harder to make money from that, or to make a profit. So really good testing ground, but you should always be looking to take it offshore if you can. And obviously Australia's next door, so that's sort of the most obvious market. But if you can crack into Europe or the States, then that's fantastic.
How do you think it plays plays into New Zealand's economy? What impact does it have in the startup world?
In what ways?
What impact does the startup world have, on New Zealand's economy and society? What role does that innovation play?
Yes, I think innovation is a really important New Zealand asset in terms of keeping us competitive in the rest of the world, and also, contributing to our GDP. So I think we're smart people. We've got a lot of industries that do very well globally, but the fact that we are innovative, we should be taking more of that to the world. We're a culture that seems to not mind, getting on a plane and flying 17 hours like you're going to do to New York in a few weeks. So yeah, I think we should do more of it. I think we're really lucky to have the NZTEs and the Callahans. I think probably in the last 5 or 6 years, they've both got really, really good at helping startups get themselves going, and then how they can export that product or service. So kudos to both of them for that.
You talk about this. New Zealand's market isn't quite big enough to get the money that's needed to really scale these things.
Yeah.
But also, you're a very purpose-driven company. You always tell us that that's the purpose always, making communities safer, cities safer, as the name suggests. So how do you balance that? Like entrepreneurs who are in it for the money versus having sure you've got your purpose. Like what's more important? Are they both important? How do you balance that?
Yeah, so we've never chased the money. The purpose has always been what gets us up out of bed and the reason for the company. And for whatever reason, we've never had to chase the money. The money's just come to us. So does that mean we could have scaled faster than we have? Possibly, but I don't know, we're very happy with how things are going now. We're happy with our reputation in the industry. We're happy why certain police forces are choosing us and some of the comments we're getting. So, but we've never ever chased the money. So, and it was probably something my dad said to me when I was really young. He said, if you go out there and you focus on the money, then that probably won't come. But if you focus on something that you enjoy, that's not a job, and also provides value to someone, then the money will probably come, right? So, and you hear that from a lot of mentors and a lot of companies. There's been a number of police comments to me and staff in the company recently, like, these guys get it. They think the same way we do. They're one of us. They're doing it for the right reasons, and we are, and that's fundamental in our culture. And it's just really nice to hear customers tell you that without you asking them. So
yeah.
But yeah. So I hope that answers the question.
No, absolutely. Yeah, it definitely does. And in terms of starting a startup, there's a high probability that startups fail. Like it's a normal thing for startups to do. So as you're doing yours, and like, did they ever cross your mind that like most likely we're going to fail? I mean, you obviously didn't, but did you have any doubts in your mind as you went along?
You have many doubts, and they never stop. And so I think it keeps you very focused. I think fear does motivate. Fear does motivate in terms of things going wrong and running out of money. I think if you treat your customers well, you do a good job. The money's always there, and you do something that's that the market's wanting. But I don't know whether we talked about this in the other session, right? I mean, the first 2 years were a complete failure for the company, right? We made $0 both of those years. So and you just have to keep on going. And even the journey to get to where we are now has been a difficult journey. There's been times where you think, gee, there must be easier ways than this to bring money home and put it on the table. But eventually, if you just hang in there, it pans out. If you're doing it for the right reasons. So
cool, awesome.
Cool.
And you've spoken before about making software that's easy, like to reduce time. Police have to spend learning and troubleshooting. How important is it considering the end user when creating a product or startup?
Yeah, extremely important, and it's been our philosophy from the start. I can recall a wonderful police guy, Gary Davey, at the very start of this whole journey said, Scotty, this needs to be really, really easy to use. We're dumb policemen. We can't go on a 1-week training course, and we're probably going to break it. So whatever you do, make it super easy. So we had a philosophy back then, and it's been a little bit harder as we've got more and more features on VGrid, SaferCity, to keep it that way, but that you shouldn't need an instruction manual. It should be so easy and so obvious. And so, we grapple with it because every time police want a new feature or the community want a new feature, how do we add that feature without making the product more complicated? But probably like Steve Jobs and Jonathan Ive used to argue, it's just how do you keep it simple? It's always been a fundamental philosophy.
Awesome. And well, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Do you have any final thoughts to leave the audience on? Well, cool. Thanks so much for the time, Scott, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks very much, Stanley, and thanks very much for watching.